Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to our June meetup for PNSQC, co-hosted with PLUS QA. Thanks guys so much for coming, and also for both of you Manus in the back, our founder of PLUS QA, for allowing us to be in this space. For putting together the presentation that we're going to show everyone tonight. So I'm going to go to the first slide. For those of you who aren't super familiar with PNSQC, we are. Oh, you got it?
I'm trying to get rid of this thing.
Yes.
We are. I'm sure remove the participants. What's there?
We're the oldest software quality conference here in North America. We're in our 43rd year. We have an annual conference that happens every October alongside these monthly meetups that we do, and the topics from our speakers range in a variety of different areas, including technical processes, project management, agile, leadership, AI, emerging technologies like that, enterprise IT. So always looking for new speakers as well as volunteers. So any of this stuff sounds interesting to you or enjoy the talk, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards. Next slide. And then a couple announcements regarding our conference. We do have our early bird registration going on, and that's going to end in about a week, June 30th. So you can visit pnsqc.org/register to purchase your tickets now at the
20% off.
20% off. And then we're also, even though we've closed our technical paper submission, we are looking still for folks to participate in poster papers. We've got a link there, pnsqc.org/poster, if you'd like to learn more about that. And so with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Merlin Bennett, who is the accessibility project manager here at PLUS QA, who's put together this presentation about accessibility testing. And yeah, go on.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Can you, before we go too much further, can you stop sharing and then reshare?
Sure.
It doesn't look like it's fully shared. There, that looks better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Better for me too. Need that little bit, will go away. Okay. Oh, thank you. Hello. No. Hi, everyone. Sorry. My name's Merlin Bennett, and in today's presentation, today I'm talking about accessibility testing, which is something that's very important to me, and I would like it to be important to more people. So kind of what this is going to be is it's going to be like a intro to accessibility as well as how to get started with it if you want to try and pursue it yourself. So just, a little bit of information about me first. I am the accessibility project manager at PLUS QA. I've been testing accessibility since 2017. Pretty much got thrown into it right away as soon as I started here. They just said, we need someone to test this. So I kind of was one of the people who figured it out, and learned quite a bit since then, and it's grown quite a bit since then. So it's actually kind of budding into this big field. We'll talk more about that. But yeah, just a few of my hobbies include game development. I'm a ballet dancer, and I like to do digital art. I've been trying to do more of that recently. And what I really like about accessibility testing. So first of all, accessibility testing is user interface / user experience testing, right? We're not testing backend. We're not testing data. We're not testing load or we're testing, does the visual user interface / user experience work for the people using it? And I just think that's really exciting to test, right? I mean, you find a lot of interesting things testing visual interfaces. And you could probably derive that maybe because I'm a game developer and I like to play video games. So it all comes together. I also find accessibility or assistive technology tools to be very fascinating. It's really been a learning experience, just finding out how many tools there are out there that people use. And I didn't know about most of them until I started doing this. But yeah, the people with disabilities have this whole suite of tools that they use to interact with the web and with their phones and all those kinds of things. And I just think that's really cool, and I like learning about it, using it. And then most importantly, accessibility improves people's lives. I mean, I like working in a field that has impact on people and helps people and improves the web for people. So just a quick breakdown on what we'll be talking about today. First, we're going to do an intro to accessibility. Then I'm going to talk about the WCAG and some of the guidelines around that and what it is. Then we'll do like a breakdown of some of the testing methods you can use. And then I'll give a little bit of a live demo. We can find a website to test and maybe find some bugs together. And then we'll do a Q&A session at the end. So first things first, introduction to accessibility. And we have a picture of one of our testers, Jesus here. Jesus, you're currently our poster child on our presentation. So appreciate you being our photo model today. So what exactly are we talking about here? I keep saying accessibility. What does that mean? So in a very general term, accessibility is the practice of making services and products available to people with disabilities. In some real world examples of that you've probably seen include things like wheelchair ramps, subtitles in movies, braille keyboards on ATMs. I mean, the list goes on. There's so many now that you probably don't even realize how many of them you see on a regular basis. However, in the context of software development, accessibility refers to making software usable to people with motor impairments, visual impairments, audio impairments, and cognitive impairments. We call this ALLI for short. That is, it's like the tech term for accessibility. And that is because if you were to take all the letters in the word accessibility and remove the ones in the middle, you would have 11 letters. So it'd be A followed by 11 letters, followed by the letter Y. Yeah, ALLI, right? So I don't know why they call it that. I don't know how they came up with that. It's just one of those tech terms that people like to make up in our field. And then I already mentioned this, but people with disabilities have their own tools for using computers. So as QA analysts, it is our job to make sure that their tools and methodologies are compatible with the software that we test. That's what we're testing when we test accessibility. So here at PLUS QA, what we do is, first of all, we've tested over 100 products for accessibility compliant. I mean, I've lost track of how many things I've tested, but there are things like e-commerce, like promotional websites, some applications as well, desktop applications, mobile applications. We also have a partnership with the Oregon Commission for the Blind, meaning we have testers on our team who are blind and utilize screen readers themselves in their daily lives. We have a team of certified testers who have gone through training through like a certification program. So yeah, that's kind of what accessibility looks like here. That's how we test at PLUS QA. We also offer ACR and BPAT services, and that's kind of like official documentation or accessibility audits that we provide at the end of our audit, and they'll kind of be something you could show to people or show to a client or show to your producer, and then they can use that as information.
Do you know what ACR or VPAT stand for?
Yep. ACR stands for Accessibility Performance Report, and VPAT stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. And I can talk about those a bit more later as well. So I really want to go over why accessibility matters before we get into testing. Digital devices and products are currently integral to modern day living. I think we can all agree on that, right? We use our phones for everything. We use computers to communicate. We use the internet for almost every service. So everyone is also likely to experience a disability at some point in their lives, right? When we get older, some of our faculties will fail us. We might end up in an accident and be unable to move, or even temporary things happen, right? Where you might not be able to see something because the sun is too bright, and there's lots of scenarios where you could consider yourself to be in need of like assistance, or you might have something that's disabled you from interacting with a product the expected way. So adding accessibility features makes products easier to use for everybody, not just with people with disabilities. I mean, I mentioned that like sunlight example, but we could also go back to the subtitles example because lots of people like to watch TV with subtitles on, and it just makes it easier to watch. So these features are good for everyone. Add accessibility, it just improves things for everyone, and it gives us more options. And that's good. Yeah, we've got captions, alt text also, and headings. If those are done correctly, it helps out in search engine optimization. That's great for, you know, your product if you want to come up on Google. Yeah, I kind of mentioned like readability with high contrast text. Also, excluding users from using a product has negative ethical and sometimes legal implications, right? If you offer a service and you exclude a demographic of people from that service, that is a form of discrimination. So that's like opening you up to legal grounds for litigation. And just as a general concept, cutting out a percentage of your consumer base from utilizing your product is bad for business, right? Those are potential customers. So you want your product to be accessible so they can buy your product. So some quick metrics on accessibility. More than 15% of the world's population and 26% of the US population have disabilities. These numbers will continue to rise as the population ages and chronic health conditions persist. So 19.9 million people in the US have physical disabilities, 15.2 million have cognitive difficulties, 12 million people have hearing difficulties, and then 11 million people have vision difficulties. Just to put into perspective how many people are actually affected by this. So how exactly do we make the web accessible? Because it's such a foreign term, right? It's like there's so many things to account for. How do we even know what all of it is? So that's where enter the WCAG. This is a list of guidelines created by a nonprofit group called the W3. And they created these guidelines to be a list of rules that web developers can follow to ensure their product is accessible. And they are pretty all-encompassing. I mean, pretty much nothing is left out of WCAG. And if something is, they are constantly updating it and reformatting it and trying to make it as inclusive as possible. I mentioned it was created by W3. There are 3 levels to WCAG. So level A is kind of the bare minimum. It means, you know, your website or your product is usable, and that's kind of the bare minimum, right? If someone can at least use the product, then it's accessible to a very limited degree. So that's kind of level A compliance means that you've met that requirement. Most people shoot for the second level, which is double A, which means that it is both usable, but also easy to use. So it's one thing to make your site usable. It's another thing to make it actually like easy to engage with and have a good user experience. And that's something you probably want for your customers. And then there's a third level, AAA. Most people don't go for this one because it's considered above and beyond. There's just kind of some minute details you can do to make your product better. There's some extra accommodations you can add. Like I said, most people don't go for that, but if you have the time and resources, it is recommended. The WCAG can be also applied to software like desktop and mobile apps. So it's not just limited to web. It is tailored to the web, and you'll notice if you read it yourself, the guidelines are very much focused on web pages and HTML and HTML practices. But they do say, and you can kind of extract your own practices from it, that it will apply to things like mobile applications and desktop applications. It's also not as challenging to adhere to as you think. Most developers hear accessibility and they get, they get really in their head about it. It's like, wow, there's all this work I have to do to make my product accessible, and I had no idea. And how many people is this even going to affect? It's not that hard, actually. A lot of the time, all you have to do is just add a few pieces of HTML to your components, to your web page. And there's other things too, like make sure things can be paused, to make sure you can mute the audio. We're going to go over a few of those here in a second. But basically, we can form a testing strategy based on the WCAG. So currently WCAG is in version 2.2. And if we apply conformance levels A and AA, we get the following. A quick breakdown of WCAG is it's got 4 categories. Those categories are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, meaning all of their rules are based around those 4 concepts. Perceivable means things like text alternatives, time-based media, adaptable web pages, distinguishable text. Operable means it's a keyboard accessible. Do you have enough time to use it? Does it have the potential to induce like epileptic reactions? Is it generally navigable from a user experience standpoint? Do the input modalities work? Understandable means, is it readable? Is it predictable? Do you need help to understand how to use it? Does it have ample instructions? And then robust is kind of mostly just compatibility. There's actually only even 2 rules for robust, and one of them is obsolete. So literally it just means, does the screen reader have the ability to read the web page? If so, then you've passed the robust guidelines. So we can form a testing strategy out of this, right? We can check for all of these things as we perform our audits. And here's how we would build a test plan. You can kind of break that down into 3 categories of testing. There's screen reader testing, which is for to accommodate for people who are blind. That ensures that screen readers are compatible with the software. You have to check for the operability as well as the readability. So that's one test pass, right? Just check the whole product for compatibility with the screen reader. Then another one would be keyboard mode. Can you use the website or the application using just a keyboard? So can you navigate with just tab? Can you operate things with spacebar and arrow keys? And then there's the visual test pass, which is generally just things you can check by looking at the page. They don't really require a full emulation of the users involved. You can usually just apply a scanner or check the HTML, and you'll be able to see which of those rules are passing and not passing. I want to talk about scanners really quick. Scanners are automation tools that will check websites for accessibility compliance on an HTML level, meaning it will actually go through the HTML and see if there are any components that are missing the necessary attributes. We don't generally use them here. And the reason is because we find them to be unreliable. They will pick up false positives, meaning they will report bugs that should not actually be considered bugs. And they will also miss user experience related issues. So if you, for example, have, if you have a form that needs to be filled out and there's no instructions on how to fill out the form, the scanner is not going to pick that up. It doesn't understand how to fill out the form either. So it's not going to say, you need to add instructions. It is exclusively useful for scanning HTML, and it will also check for things like text and alt text a little bit as well. You can check contrast, landmarks, alt text. I'll just list a few that I find useful: Wave, Site Improve, and Lighthouse. Lighthouse is actually built into Chrome, so you can actually just open up DevTools and have it run a Lighthouse scan, and it'll find accessibility bugs for you. Okay, moving on. So let's talk about each of those 3 test methodologies I was just going over. We'll start with keyboard only. So what you need to check when you're doing keyboard only testing is, first of all, navigation. All interactive items on the page must be selectable with the tab key. And you've probably done this yourself using a web page. You can select links and buttons with tab, right? Links, buttons, checkboxes, sliders, the list goes on. There's so many HTML components, but anything that's interactive needs to be selected. You must be able to also see the item that you have currently selected. Maybe you've noticed sometimes if you select something with tab, there's no focus box around it, and you kind of just have to guess where it is. That's an accessibility issue. The page content also needs to be navigable with the arrow keys. Can be scrolled up and down with the arrow keys. When you move a slideshow carousel, if you press left and right arrows. Can you switch tabs? Can you switch radio buttons on the page using arrow keys? So also very key to navigation. And that kind of also blends into operation a bit, because you also have to make sure that the web page works with the keyboard. It's not just reading and navigating the page. There are also things that you have to be able to use. Most things have to be activated with spacebar or enter, depending on their context. Links are activated with the enter key, for example. Buttons are activated with spacebar or the enter key. So those are things that we all have to check for, make sure that they're behaving as expected. Anything that requires mouse movement must also have a substitution. So clicking and dragging, for example, should have some kind of arrow key substitution, possibly. If you can come up with another way to substitute some sort of mouse-based movement, great. It doesn't really matter what you do, as long as the functionality that would be utilized by a person with a mouse can also be equally utilized by a person with a keyboard. So yeah, I gave a few examples. Can you move a slider with the arrow keys? Can you click and drag things with the keyboard somehow? Hotkeys also work, right? If you've got some commands that you just say, okay, let's make a hotkey for this, that's fine. It's all part of the keyboard. Although you probably want to add instructions somewhere so that people know how to use those. So here's an example of a keyboard-only bug. You see we've got this storefront page, and I've got an annotation here for the bug. It says keyboard focus is trapped in the navigation region. So the expected result here is that users can press the tab key to select the interactive elements on the page and navigate the page content. This is WCAG guideline 2.1.2. It's called no keyboard trap. You want to make sure the keyboard focus is not trapped. However, the actual result is that the keyboard focus cannot move past this search field. Press tab, it will just stay in the same place. And that's an accessibility issue. We cannot navigate the page. So keyboard focus is trapped, and that's we see a lot of bugs like that. We also see a lot of bugs where things get skipped, or things might not be operable, can't activate them. There's some common examples of keyboard bugs. So next, let's talk about screen reader testing.
Okay. There was a question about the browser a little bit ago.
Yes.
Does this include the Axe Core browser extension?
Core browser. I'm not super familiar with that one, but that's an example of a scanner. We haven't used that one very much, just because, like I said, we don't use cloud scanners. But
I guess I missed the context of the question. But it's with the Lighthouse. Is that where you're comparing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me know if that was the answer you will get more. So let's talk about screen readers next. But with screen readers, you're testing for readability. All of the page content must be readable with the screen reader. Okay, wait. I'm getting ahead of myself. Wait. What's a screen? So not everyone knows what that is, right? I might have just started talking about screen readers and like, hold on. What even is that? So blind and visually impaired people actually use a tool called a screen reader to read content on the web. It can pick up text, and it can also pick up images. So these fall under a blanket category of tools called assistive technology. Like I said, they can read text, they can read images, but they can only read images if the images have alt text programmed into them, which is something you do on the HTML level. A lot of screen readers now do have image recognition, and that's becoming more and more common as we get, language learning models and image recognition models going. But alt text is still required to pass WCAG. And the reason is the image recognition software might not match what you want that image to say, and the user will have a different experience from what you intended. And that's not accessible, right? That's not accessibility. We're not trying to create a different experience. We want everyone to have more or less the same experience. So some of the main screen readers people use on desktop are JAWS, NVDA, and VoiceOver. And then on smartphones, they are called TalkBack and VoiceOver. VoiceOver is by Apple. They have it on Mac OS and iOS. It's called the same. So let's get back to testing, right? We're looking to make sure that all the page content is readable with the screen reader. That includes images, not just text. So they need to have alt text. Buttons and links also need to have accurate descriptions. So if you've got an icon, if you have a button that's just an icon, that needs to have an accurate description, since it doesn't have any text. And if anything ever changes on the page, for example, if a pop-up appears, or if an error message appears, that needs to get announced to the user, because a blind user won't be able to see that. So the screen reader can actually pick that up in real time if it's programmed correctly and announce it to the user as soon as it appears. Labeling conventions must also be correct. So if it's a link, it must use the link label. If it's a button, it needs to be labeled as a button. Headings need to be labeled and arranged correctly. And then anything that has multiple states, like a checkbox or a tab or like an expandable accordion, needs to have a label for its state that says it's expanded or selected or something like that. Okay. Second, quick sip of water. Okay. We're also checking for operation, meaning does the content work with the screen reader? Can be operated? Any interactive page elements need to respond to the screen reader's activation input. This is not the same as using tab, spacebar, and enter, and I cannot stress this enough. It's not the same thing because many screen readers have their own activation methods. So if you just navigate a page using tab key and activate things with spacebar and enter, you're not actually checking if the screen reader works. You're checking keyboard on. So for example, VoiceOver performs inputs by simulating a mouse input wherever the box is on the screen that it uses to show what or to select content. Similar to the keyboard, however, anything that uses the mouse must have a substitution. There are some exceptions to this and some additional guidelines that have to be applied, however. For example, hotkeys must not interfere with the screen reader hotkeys because screen readers have their own suite of hotkeys. So we have to make sure that the hotkeys can be disabled if the user needs to override them. And then, like I said before, context changes need to be reported in real time. If you activate a button that causes something to expand on the page, the user needs to be informed of this right away so that they know it's going to expand it successfully. So here's an example of a screen reader bug. I've got an image here of another storefront, and it's a picture of the Nintendo Switch promo image. And the screen reader is reading this image, and its description of it is link, learn more. So we've missed a lot of information here, right? We've missed all of this other text on the image. It doesn't say Nintendo Switch, doesn't say the name of the other consoles, and it doesn't describe what's in the image. All it said was this text in the bottom right, learn more. If I'm a blind user, I don't know what the heck it's even talking about. Well, what are we learning more about? So the alt text needs to include that description. It needs to have those contents included. So yeah, that's the expected result. Is the screen reader description of the image includes all of the visually displayed text as well as any key components of the image. In this case, the game console or the key component of the image. The guideline for that is 1.1.1, non-text content. The actual result is that all it says is learn more. And there's no description of the video game consoles and there's no description of their type. Okay, last but certainly not least, let's talk about visual testing. So visual test pass is kind of a misnomer because we're not actually testing for like visual disabilities. We're just testing content from a visual perspective, meaning we're just spot checking things. We're just checking for compliance with certain guidelines, and usually you can just look. You can just look at the page and you can tell. Do the videos have subtitles and audio descriptions? Does the HTML include a laying element? Is there moving content on the page, or can the content be paused? Can you mute any audio? Are there any error messages, and do those error messages say what's wrong? Does the website have a search function? Does it have a help function? There's a few things, however, that require a bit more application and a bit more analysis. So text needs to meet a certain contrast ratio. You're probably going to need a scanner for that. And you can use one of those scanners I mentioned earlier, but I actually recommend you just sample the color directly because sometimes scanners don't sample that color directly. So there's applications that will let you actually check the color of a pixel on the screen, and it'll tell you the hex color, and it'll also calculate the contrast ratio for you. Can the text spacing be overridden? You're probably going to need a plugin for that because that's not something you can just modify as a project here. Does the page layout support 200% zoom? Does it support 320%? So sorry, 320 pixel width. These are both WCAG requirements. You just check this. You just check this by changing browser size, but again, it's got a little bit more application included. The page content can't flash more than 3 seconds. More than 3 times a second. You're going to need a tool to check for that. I mean, generally you can tell, but if you see something that flashes, it might still be okay. So you have to use a tool called Peep to scan the video, and then it'll tell you if it's an issue. Buttons need to be a minimum size of 24 by 24 CSS pixels. You're going to need a scanner for that most likely. Can't just look at the size of it and see how many pixels wide it is, especially because they're CSS pixels, which are relative. And there's lots of other little things that you have to do to check. So my suggestion is make a checklist. Figure out what all the checks you have to do are, and just make a checklist, and then you can run through that checklist every time you test. Here's an example of visual eye bug. I mean, there's just so many. I just had to pick one that was kind of easy to pick on. I really like this screenshot of Sonic the Hedgehog because he looks equally upset as I am that there was a bug here. You can't pause this video on the Amazon Prime Video page, and he's like, "What? Why can't I pause this?" That's an accessibility issue. If you are easily distracted or you can't read things while there's something moving in the background, you're not going to be able to read the rest of the content on this page. So the expected result is that anything moving or animated that lasts longer than 5 seconds can be paused. Guideline 2.2.2, pause, stop, hide. Actual result is that the hero video can't be paused and it's playing by itself. Okay, so, we've been picking on Amazon, and I actually figured we could just do a little bit of a demonstration of testing Amazon right now and maybe find some bugs together. So I will switch the screen share here in a second. I know it's still showing my slideshow. Let me know if this is showing up okay. All right, great. So, Amazon.com. First thing I like to do is I'd like to just go through with the keyboard focus, using the tab key. Let's press tab and see what happens. Okay, great. Actually, it opened up a skip to content menu. This is exclusively something for screen reader users and keyboard only users. It lets you bypass the navigation block, like the mega menu. It's also got some keyboard some keyboard shortcuts that we can use. That's awesome. Great job, Amazon. And we can see the keyboard focus moving around the screen as I press the tab key. That's also what we want, right? We want to know where we are anytime I select something with tab. It is kind of weird that it moves the text as I use tab key to navigate the page. I might file that just because it's kind of tacky, but it's working for all intents and purposes. I'm going to find that bug that I showed earlier. So if we go to the Gatorade, mini page or store page, and we try and tab through here, it's to this search field, and you can see I can't tab past it for some reason. It's a keyboard trap. I can't get to these blanks here. I can't keep navigating the page. As a tester, I would find a way to bypass this so I can keep testing the page. Usually you can just kind of click past it. Well, I still might not be able to do that. So it's pretty bad. So I would follow this, right? It's an accessibility violation. Let's check this page with the screen reader. So I'm going to turn on the screen reader. You might be able to hear it. You might not. I'm also going to have to unmute myself. My computer. New set.
VoiceOver on Safari, Amazon.com, Gatorade, hydration search all Gatorade, info, search text field, flag, as keyword focus.
Okay, sorry.
Gatorade.
That's enough. Sorry if that's going on.
Top of best. Zoom share toolbar.
Please stand by. Technical difficulties.
System dialog.
Okay, I'll just have to bear with hearing myself on the computer. It's fine. Okay, so when I turned on the screen reader, it said a lot of things. It described which browser I was on, and it described some other things like the very distracted by
It's very hard.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything we can do about it.
Background auto. Hold on a second. Okay, try talking.
Yeah, still picking me up. I wish I could mute it on my end.
Menu window, system dialog. Press space to show sub-menu. You are currently.
My name's my audio.
Menu window, system dialog. You are currently.
Oh, wait a minute.
Try it again.
Okay.
Selected.
Uh,
Currently on check.
sounds a little better. I can't hear myself with this stuff. We'll make it work. Okay. It explained which component I was on, which is the search field. I'm going to use, sorry, I'm trying to pause the screen reader so it doesn't talk over. I'm going to use some screen reader commands to navigate around the page. Now, keep in mind, I'm not using tab key. I'm using the read next item command, which is specific to the screen reader, and it is what users will rely on as they navigate the page. So for this, I'm going to press Control Option right arrow. And immediately it's selected. Oh, we're on back to support.
You are currently on menu.
Interesting.
Content.
So I found a bug. I told it to read the next item, and it did. It read this image here of a woman sitting in a field drinking Gatorade.
Utah.
And it described it as menu. It's not a menu, it's an image. It didn't read any of the text. Let's try reading it again. Sorry, I'm just going to leave. Just yeah, so it's picking up this product menu, and I can't even see where it is. Very strange. So I report that probably as a 2.4.3 issue. There's something weird going on with the focus order where it's picking up something that's not supposed to be there. I'd also report it as a 4.1.2 issue. It is describing the item here incorrectly. It's describing this image as a menu, and it's not a menu.
Can you share your full screen for a minute?
Yeah, I think I am.
I can't see the black.
Yeah, gotcha.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's read a few more things here. Let's try and get back. Text field. It's reading these mega menu buttons pretty well. I don't see any problems there. Let's open this share button and see what happens. Oh, it opened like the browser share feature. That's not what I guess it's fine. Follow Gatorade button. That's fine. It doesn't match the text of the button, but it says follow. So at least it's kind of similar.
What's providing your screen reading right now?
This is VoiceOver. And every Mac device has VoiceOver free.
Okay.
And yeah, you can just activate it through this.
So the name of the software is VoiceOver.
VoiceOver, yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of stuck. I'm going to go to another page because this one's really broken. Gosh, what's another product I did pick on? I mean, we picked on Nintendo earlier.
Yeah.
Let's go back there. I'm especially upset with them because I can't get a Switch 2. Gonna visit the Nintendo store. And so yeah, let's just read the page content here. I'm going to move the screen reader focus to main content. It does read this Nintendo logo, which is good. So, you know, that's great. It's possibly actually text and it's just reading it because it's plain text. I think that's what it is because it doesn't say it's an image. I'm going to tell it to read next item. It skips that banner image of like Mario and Luigi and Princess Peach. I'd probably report that because that's kind of integral to the product experience if we really think about it. You could say it's cosmetic, but I would disagree. I would say if you're coming to the Nintendo webpage and you see Mario there, that's going to be a very different first impression from coming to the Nintendo webpage and not seeing, right? It's adding to the user experience. It's vital key information.
What would be an example alt text that you have?
I can give one right now. So it just selected this link and it used a very strange description of the link. It's kind of just a series of letters and numbers. And it probably should say Nintendo or Nintendo logo. That would be the alt text for it. And then, yeah, sorry, you were asking about Mario and Luigi and all that. I think it's ultimately up to the product designer / copywriter / graphic designer what they want their alt text to be, but I would probably say something like image of Luigi, Mario, Princess Peach, and Toad jumping for joy. No, that's not a very good one. I'd workshop that one a bit. Maybe say like they're having fun in various poses. I'd probably just say in various poses. I've got a generic term for them. They're doing. Okay, it's describing the breadcrumb navigation. That's probably expected. Good that it tells us that's breadcrumb navigation section. Otherwise, we would just hear that text that says Nintendo, and we wouldn't know what that means. Moving on, follow Nintendo. Yeah, we're back at this mega menu like we saw on the Gatorade page. It's more or less working how we wanted to. I'm going to try expanding this more menu. So I'm going to press Control Option Spacebar. That's the activation command for the screen reader. Looks like it auto-focused this popover menu. Good, right? We want to be in the menu that we just opened. It tells us what the current page is. That's pretty cool. If we read the current page, we'll say that we're already on that page. It tells us that these submenus are in class state. I would possibly consider this one above. So this submenu of featured games has text that says featured games in bold text. To me, that's a heading. It is describing a section, and these buttons below it are sub buttons or subheading sections. So this should probably have a heading link, and they forgot to add that, and it should just have a simple H3 tag. I would say H3 is fine. Meaning it's a level 3 heading. It's got it. That's its like ranking in the hierarchy, and that's how we know that everything that comes after it is subjective to that heading, which is all these buttons here. Do a little more testing. I'm going to stop at the screen reader testing and see if we can spot something that's visual on this page. So I'm just going to look at the page here, see if anything jumps out at me. What I'm actually looking for right now are contrast issues, because those are generally pretty easy to find. I think I'm going to check this text. This white text on bright red, kind of a, it could go either way. That could be a pass. It could not be a pass. So I'm going to open up this app called Color Contrast Analyzer, and I'm going to sample the background color. And then I'm going to sample the text color, which is white. Kind of hard sometimes to get the right pixel, but you got to choose the one that's like the most different. So don't choose like the anti-alias pixel if you can. Yeah, see, I just missed it. The wrong color. I get on a bigger letter here. Actually, let's go to this one. It's a nice big chunk. 4.6 out of 1. Okay, so it actually passed. It's just above the contrast ratio, which is 4.5 to 1. So nice job, Nintendo. You've made your text readable by everyone. Maybe there's something on this Learn More page. I'm clicking the Learn More page for the Nintendo Switch. Gosh, we're kind of just in the Amazon interface here, so I'm not.
You could pick on the PNSQC.org site.
Should I?
Sure. Don't go past the homepage, though.
All right, let's check the text here. This orange text looks a little bright to me. I'll sample the orange text and then sample it. I already know this is, I can already see where this is going. Just in case it's not actually absolute white, I'm going to sample the background color, which is white. And we got our contrast ratio 2.2 to 1. And that's way below what we want it to be, which is 4.5 to 1. There is actually an exception for bold text such as this. So this could actually pass if it was 3 to 1. And that's because it's larger than standard text. But it would not pass if, for example, this smaller text was orange. Here, this button, it won't pass for the button because the button's using small text. So yeah, that's a contrast issue. Affects people with color blindness, affects people with like low vision, like blurry vision, because they need to be able to read that stuff. But if it's all kind of the same color, it's going to get all levels together. If there's anything else I can pick on here, I promise not to be too cruel.
We might not have alt text for any of those logos.
Okay, we can check that with the screen reader. Turn voiceover back on. And then I'm going to use Control Option Shift. No, sorry, not Shift. Control Option right arrow to start navigating the page. Right away, we've got the PNSQC logo is being read, and its description is main logo 2025.jpg. It's missing a description of all that text in the logo, like 43rd annual. Well, ideally, the alt text should be 43rd annual Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference, October 13 through 15, 2025. We want all that to be included in text because it needs to be readable, right? It's pretty vital information. This is fine. Actually, it might not be fun. I'm going to type something in this search field, just test, and then I'm going to read it again. Yeah. Well, I'd actually pass this. So before it was reading the placeholder text, which was search, and when I replaced that text, instead of saying search, it now says test. And it should probably still say search, but I'm going to give it a pass because it still says it's a search text field, meaning I can still tell what it does. Okay, let's do a few more. Submit button, that's fine. Link PNSQC. All these social media links have the same readout, which is PNSQC. This one should probably say PNSQC Facebook page. Same with this one, PNSQC Twitter page /X. It's still the Twitter logo, so I'd call it that. But this one just says linked groups, which we don't even know the website that we're going to or whose page we're going to, even though it's a LinkedIn, but you can't tell. We do have a navigation landmark, and that's good because that means we can bypass the navigation. However, something I would say I noticed as I was starting to test this page is there is no skip to content button, meaning when I tab into the page, there should be a button that's the very first thing selected that says skip to content. And if I activate that, it'll bypass the navigation landmark and take us straight to the main landmark, which is the main page content. So that should probably get added in. It takes a little bit of HTML coding, and it's not an overnight fix, but all the websites need to have it. It's a level A guideline, which means it's bare minimum requirement.
Put that on our shopping list for our new platform.
I know a pretty good QA testing company for accessibility if you want something like that.
Marian, so are there buttons that are only visible to voiceover users and they're not visible to like front end, like general users, like skip to content?
The question was, are there buttons that are only visible to voiceover users or screen reader users? Generally, no. The skip to content button is maybe the only example of a piece of user interface that's only available to someone with a screen reader or the keyboard focus. Sometimes, very rare scenarios, you will have this user interface that you've designed that's just in no way compatible with a screen reader because you've got some functionality that just can't be activated with a keyboard. So you might add an invisible button somewhere that does the same thing. I can't really think of an example.
I remember like search field, like when you submit the search user, like the invisible button, because in real life you would submit by like type and enter.
Right, yeah. That was a good example. So search fields, typically it's recommended that they have a search button so that when you're reading the field with a screen reader, you can see there's a button and you know how to activate it. Because most modern search fields don't have that. You just hit enter and it goes. And some people might not understand that you have to hit enter to continue. So you could add a hidden invisible button that you would activate with a screen reader to perform the search, or you could add some instructions on the page to tell the user to press enter to perform the search. Both would be a pass. The guideline in question would be 3.3.2, which is labels or instructions, because we're lacking sufficient instructions on how to use the application. Okay, I think I'm done picking on websites, so I'm going to go back to my slideshow. Thank you for being our test subject today. I'm going to switch the screen share. Actually, I could probably just hit slideshow with sharing my whole screen. Okay. Everything's looking good. We're about wrapping up here, so I just wanted to list the tools and some resources that you can use. We've got our blog where we regularly will post accessibility resources or just some, like we did an interview with Jesus where we talked about accessibility a bit and we published that on our blog. Here's those screen readers I talked about earlier. So there's JAWS, which is the most commonly used one that has a subscription fee, or actually it's a one-time purchase, but you have to purchase it again if you want like an updated version. There's NVDA, which is free. TalkBack comes pre-installed on some Google phones, some Android phones, but not all of them, in which case you would install it from the Play Store. And then VoiceOver is pre-installed on all Apple devices, meaning iPhones and macOS. And then here's some of the testing tools I use, or that I talked about today. There's the color contrast analyzer, which lets you directly sample a pixel on the screen and it will get that pixel's color. and then it will calculate the contrast ratio of those 2 pixels that you sampled. There's Wave. I just like Wave because it's got a great user interface and it's really easy to use. And that's one of those scanners I was talking about where it will list all the bugs on the page, all the accessibility bugs. And then there's PEAT, stands for Photoepileptic Analysis Tool, I think. And that will scan videos for you and tell you if they have too many flashes and could be an epilepsy risk.
Heard some testers using Dragon. What is this?
Dragon. Question was, what is Dragon? Dragon is a speech activation program that gets used by probably most likely demographic would be people with mobile impairments, can't use a keyboard. So they have a program called Dragon that they can dictate commands to their computer with, and that has compatibility issues with some websites sometimes. So you might want to check and make sure your product works with Dragon. Thank you. Good question. Thanks for asking about that. We'll leave this up for one more second in case anyone wants the picture. Okay, moving on. So just some parting thoughts. Okay, I'm going to talk about AI because I know everyone wants to talk about AI, and I'm just going to get it out of the way. So people are wondering, can AI do the tests that we do for accessibility? The answer is yes. You could train an AI model to run like accessibility QA. I don't recommend it. And honestly, it's not really going to change because we already have automation tools that do the same thing, right? I've talked about them. They're scanners. And the problem with scanners is they pick up things that are not bugs or they miss things that are bugs. So I guess pretty much all I'm going to say about AI is if you actually trust a computer to validate a user experience for a person, I don't know what to tell you. You're putting a lot of faith in that computer. And it only takes one auditor, it only takes one person to check a website for accessibility compliance. So sure, have your AI run QA for you for accessibility, but you're still going to need someone to check it. And they're going to be doing the same things, honestly, whether you run AI on it or not. They're still going to have to do the same tests. So you're really not saving much. And that kind of, I mean, people are always wondering, like, is it going to like take my job away, or is it going to become the new accessibility tester tomorrow? Like I said, accessibility is user experience. So if you don't have a user testing it, you're not going to be able to successfully get the results you want. Yes.
Just thinking about that, would you say that the field of accessibility testing is expanding or contracting or staying the same? Or
I think it's expanding, and it's because accessibility development, web development with accessibility in mind is expanding. I would say in the past 5 years, it went from here to here. It was kind of in its infancy stage in 2020, and now it's more like in a toddler stage or maybe a adolescent stage. But point is, no one knew what this was in 2020, and then people started getting sued because their websites weren't accessible and people couldn't use their products. And so now companies are really starting to pay attention to this because it's becoming really important. So yeah, I would say it's expanding rather than shrinking or staying the same. And more people want to know what it is and how to address it and how to test for it. Kind of tying into that, VPATs. We talked about VPATs and ACRs earlier. That's a form of document that lets you kind of, it's something you can provide to potential clients or buyers, or most commonly the government, if you want to market your product to them. Then they can look at this document called the VPAT, and it will say all of the accessibility issues that your product has and how you are trying to address them. And they will decide whether or not to work with you based on it. And oftentimes you would hire someone like us to audit the website, and then you'd fix the bugs on the website, and then we would make a VPAT for you that lists all of the issues that maybe didn't get fixed and are considered, just like things that have to be the way they are, or have workarounds that are non-conventional. So that's that's kind of like the official / litigation side of accessibility.
One other question online is, are there any accessibility testing certifications for QA staff that we'd recommend?
There's a few. So there are three that come to mind. One is through DQ, and they have a university. It's called DQ University, and they will train you to be an accessibility tester. And when you finish their course, they will give you like a certificate. The certificate that they offer isn't worth like, gosh, what do I want to say? It doesn't make you like an official authority in any capacity. It doesn't give you authority, but it is nice to show and say like, hey, I really understand this. It adds some credentials to you. Second one is trusted tester. So the trusted tester certification is for people who want to test websites for the government, and they have their own sort of QA analyst suite that they go through. It's not quite the same as what DQ does. It's kind of like, I want to say it's more programmatic on a conceptual level. And that's free. Anyone can become a trusted tester. And it's similar. You take a course and you get a certificate for it. You're allowed to work with that. And then the third one is the CPACC, which is the, how do I want to describe them? They're kind of like the leading authority, global authority on accessibility, and especially in web accessibility and like software accessibility. They have a certificate that's pretty difficult to get because you have to do a lot of coursework, and you have to take credited courses, meaning they have to approve the things that you claim to be coursework, or you have to continue your credits as well. But if you can get a CPACC certification, you're pretty much considered like the authority on accessibility. So it costs money. And that's the other thing that makes it a little difficult is you have to pay money to take tests and to keep your certification active. Might be worth pursuing depending on your career. Last thing I wanted to talk about was the European Accessibility Act. So that actually goes into effect on Saturday, ironically enough. And then what happened is the EU just passed a law that says that every product now has to be accessible. So by law. And if you do not comply, they will take your product and they will remove it from the market to the best of their ability. So that's like a pretty big deal. Like the EU, all of Europe is going to take your product away from you if you do not make it accessible to everybody. So like a lot of companies are really trying to ramp up their accessibility production. And it's not, like they're not just going to pull the plug on you. They give you some allowances and they'll say, okay, here's what you need to fix. These are things that have to happen before we let you continue to sell your product. Or, if you don't do this a certain amount of time, we're going to take it down. But yeah, like that's a pretty big deal right now. And a lot of people are trying to figure out how to comply with the EAA. The guidelines for European Accessibility Act are actually pretty similar to WCAG. And I would hazard a guess that they use that as kind of their baseline. So if you are shooting for WCAG compliance, you'll probably pass EAA. And yeah, that's about it. So just want to open it up to Q&A. If there's any other questions here, feel free to ask them.
Does compliant mean that 100% of the accessibility bugs are fixed? Like sometimes we get clients who they want the lighthouse score to be like at a certain point, like 90%. Does that mean that if they have like 10% of issues still there, they're still compliant?
Question was, does compliant mean that everything is fixed? And if you have a lighthouse score, which is one of those scanners I mentioned earlier, and it's got a certain like high, if your lighthouse score comes back good, does that mean you're compliant? My answer to that is those are two separate things. Lighthouse score is just checking to see how many bugs it can find, and the score it comes up with will be based on that. WCAG compliance is its own thing. You're testing user experience like at a very high level, conceptual level. WCAG is testing for accessibility on a user experience level, which means to be compliant with WCAG, you have to abide by their rules, not by Lighthouse's rules. So if you want to say you're compliant, then yes, everything has to work with WCAG. You can have a few things that are not compliant, and you can just say that in your statement on your website. You can say, hey, our videos don't have audio description because we just can't create that, right? That's actually a pretty common one. Even though audio description is a AA requirement, a lot of people just don't do that because it's really hard to create an audio description for your video. And then there might also just be bugs that they can't address. And, or like I said, there are some things that you just can't do with a keyboard or a screen reader. You can't, for example, draw a circle with a keyboard, at least not for you. It's very difficult. Believe me, I've tried. So, you might just say in your accessibility statement on your website, hey, there's like a thing you have to do in this application where you have to like draw a line, and you're not going to be able to do that. So, like call us and we'll like, give you, we'll like let you bypass it or something like that, or just like be aware going into our product that you're not going to be able to use this part of it. Any other questions?
More than actually one question. It's a reflection. Is why accessibility tools are not compliant.
Sorry, could you repeat it?
Why accessibility tools are not compliant? Because most, if not all, are not compliant.
Yeah. I don't want to sound cynical. You're talking about things like scanners that I mentioned.
Scanners,
The question is why
Wave, or
Wave. Question is why are those tools like scanners and plugins not fully compliant? So I don't want to sound cynical, but the answer is money. In my opinion, is people make these tools to be convenient and useful, and they want people to buy them so that they have an easy solution to their non-compliant website, and they can just hit the button and see all the problems. But I mean, the real answer, I guess, is that it's just not possible to check certain things with a computer. I mean, a computer can't check, like I said earlier, it can't check if there's instructions on how to use your form, or it can't flag a form. Like if you hit a sign up form and you forget to add your email address, it's going to throw an error. And if the error doesn't have the right text, the computer's not going to catch that because the scanner can't even fill out the form. So I guess, yeah, the answer is that there's just some things that can't be tested for by a scanner. And yeah, I guess if the question is why they exist in the first place, then yeah, it's because people need solutions, and that's kind of like the quick and dirty way to make your website compliant. And it's easy to market that. There's another one called Accessibility, and it's actually not a scanner. It's a plugin that you can put on your website, and it'll supposedly make your whole website accessible. And accessibility got not only denounced by the Federation for the Blind, it also got hit by this huge lawsuit because they misleadingly marketed their product as something that would make your product accessible, make your website accessible, and it doesn't do that. So like I said, not to sound cynical, but people are trying to sell these products with the simple solution that they simply can't provide. Any other questions?
Gage has a question.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So I wanted to ask about doing accessibility testing with users that actually have disabilities. So I'm curious, kind of like in your experience, like what value that adds to the process over, not having that. And then I'm also curious about what kinds of issues you tend to find, or they tend to find when they do the testing.
Okay. Question was, what value does having a tester with disabilities themselves add, and what kind of issues do they discover? Right? I think, is that kind of the right idea?
You got it.
So first answer is a person who has never experienced blindness can never truly understand what it's like to live their life with a disability, or to be blind. Kind of same goes for kind of every disability. I mean, even if you emulate it to the best of your ability, you don't know what it's like to go through that on a day-to-day basis. And only a person who has that disability can offer that perspective. So they will catch things that you can't even fathom. And a blind user, for example, could pick up one of those user experience bugs that I mentioned earlier, where there might be content on the web page that needs certain instructions to understand how to operate, or it might be something that you and I, people who have vision, just know how to use based on pattern recognition. For example, like a scrolling carousel. I know how to use that. I see those all the time. I can easily just scroll through that and select the buttons. But a user who is blind might not know what that is, and they need some kind of guidance on how to understand that. So I would never even think to file something like that. It just doesn't occur to me. But a person who has that disability will go through the web page and they'll encounter that, and they can report that, and they can say, this is not a usable user experience. And kind of converse, I think this was also part of your question is, what value does not having the disability add as a tester? If you are someone who is blind, you might still miss content on the page, which also makes it hard to test, but also adds like a level of insight, right? So if there's an image on the page that offers some very valuable key information and it's not readable with the screen reader, a blind person testing the page won't see that. I will see that. So I could actually go to that blind person and say, hey, I noticed the screen reader doesn't pick up this image. Like, would that have changed how you use this web page if you could have read that image with the screen reader? If they say yes, then like, that's great. That's really good information. That means it's a really high impact bug, and I'm going to file it and let them know, like, hey, this is really a serious issue. Yeah, I think that kind of covers the question. Yeah, any other questions? Yes.
For multiple languages, do you have to change translate alt text or what means images?
The question was, if we're testing multiple languages, do we translate the alt text? That's kind of like the intersection between localization testing and accessibility testing. So WCAG has two guidelines related to language. One is called language of the page, and one is called language of parts. Language of the page means that the page needs a lang element. It's just a simple component that you add to your web page that tells the screen reader what language the page is in. So if you are reading a page that's in another language with a screen reader and the lang element has not been set, then the screen reader will read it in the wrong language. It'll probably start trying to pronounce like Spanish with an American accent, right? Or it'll just say it as if the J was not an H or a Y7. So that is one way to test language. And then language of parts is similar to that. If there's a section on the page that's in a different language, ideally it should switch languages when it gets to that part of the page. And the screen reader will read it in the correct style. And then when it comes to alt text, yeah, like I said, it depends on how much localization testing you're doing, but mostly you just want to check to make sure that the alt text is localized. So if I test a web page and it's in English, I'm just making sure all the alt text is in English, right? Then go to test the Spanish version. I just need to make sure it's all in Spanish. Ideally, I can also speak Spanish, and then I can tell if there's anything wrong with it. But you know, that's a slightly separate service from accessibility testing. Any more questions? Cool. All right. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for attending and for listening to my talk on accessibility. I hope you walk away with this with some new insight and maybe some skills of your own that you can apply, and maybe you'll even spot some accessibility issues in your day-to-day lives. So thank you.
All right.
Thanks everyone online for being here too.
Thanks, everybody.
If no one had a chance to get pizza, there's some pizza in the break room over there if anyone's hungry, and drinks as well. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. You can stick around if you want to network or chat.
Our next meetup.
Oh yes, our next meetup is going to actually be August 2nd. You're going to be working with another group, just having a networking session at Cathedral Park in North Portland. So if you want to visit our meetup page or website, learn more about that. I just posted that a couple days ago. Anything else I'm forgetting?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Thank you all.